Before dawn ever touched the rice fields of San Isidro, Mateo de la Cruz was already awake. The rooster's call echoed across the damp earth, but Mateo had risen long before it. His bare feet pressed into cool soil as he stepped outside the small bamboo house he had shared with his parents since childhood. The air smelled of wet grass, wood smoke, and promise. In the faint glow of the moon, rows of rice stalks stretched endlessly, whispering in the breeze like an ocean made of green. Mateo inhaled deeply. Another day of farming. Another day of carrying a life no one outside this village knew existed. At 42 years old, Mateo had hands hardened by decades of labor. His fingers were thick, cracked, and scarred. His back curved slightly from years of bending under the sun. If someone passed him on the dirt road, they would see only another farmer, another man blending into the endless rhythm of rural life. What they would never guess was that inside this quiet, humble farmer lived a voice so deep, so rich, so powerful, it could shake the ground beneath their feet. A voice that, one day, would make people whisper. Even Elvis would be jealous. But in San Isidro, Mateo was simply known as Kuya Mateo, the man who worked harder than anyone else and spoke less than most. He liked it that way. Mateo's childhood had been simple, but not easy. He was born into poverty, the second of 4 children. His father, Ramon, was a rice farmer who never complained, even when storms destroyed months of work. His mother, Lena, sold vegetables at the local market, often skipping meals so her children could eat. There was no television in their home. No radio. No musical instruments. But there was singing. Every evening, after long days in the fields, Ramon would sit on the wooden steps outside their house and hum old Filipino folk songs. His voice was not trained, not polished, but it was warm. It wrapped around the family like a blanket. Sometimes Lena would join in, her soft harmonies floating above Raymond's melody. Little Mateo would sit between them, eyes closed, listening. Those moments felt like magic. One night, when Mateo was about 6 years old, he surprised his parents by singing along. At first, his voice was thin, unsure, like a hesitant breeze. But when he reached the lower notes, something strange happened. The sound that came out of him didn't match his small body. It was deep, unnaturally deep. Ramon stopped humming. Lena's eyes widened. Mateo opened his eyes, confused. Did I do something wrong? Ramon stared at his son as if seeing him for the first time. No, Anik, he said quietly. You did something special. Mateo didn't understand what that meant. He only knew that when he sang, something inside him felt steady, calm, whole. But special gifts don't always lead to special lives. As Mateo grew older, responsibility came early. By the age of 10, he was already working in the fields before school and after school. By 14, he had dropped out entirely to help his family survive. There was no time for dreams. No time for music. Songs became something Mateo carried silently inside his chest, humming only when he was alone or when the wind was loud enough to hide him. In the village, people didn't talk about becoming singers. They talked about planting seasons, crop prices, and survival. Dreaming felt dangerous, so Mateo buried his. Years passed. Mateo's siblings eventually moved to the city to find work. His parents grew older, weaker. Mateo stayed. He inherited the fields. He inherited the responsibility. And he inherited a life that seemed already written. Still, the voice inside him grew stronger. When he worked alone in the fields, Mateo would sometimes sing quietly. Not pop songs. Not fancy melodies. He sang old ballads he had heard once from a passing radio. He sang hymns from church. He sang melodies he made up on the spot. And every time he sang low, really low, the sound vibrated through his chest like thunder trapped beneath skin. Sometimes birds would fly away from nearby trees. Sometimes his own body startled him. But no one else ever heard. Or so he thought. One afternoon, while Mateo was harvesting rice near the edge of his field, a teenage boy named Carlo was walking home from school. Carlo was known in the village for being curious, always wandering where he shouldn't. As Carlo passed the field, he heard something strange. A sound like distant thunder. Slow, deep, beautiful. He stopped, listened. The sound wasn't coming from the sky. It was coming from the field. Carlo carefully stepped closer and saw Mateo bent over, cutting rice, quietly singing. Carlo's mouth fell open. He had never heard a human voice like that before. When Mateo finished the line, Carlo blurted out, "Kuya Mateo." Mateo jumped so hard he nearly dropped his sickle. "Carlo, what are you doing there?" Carlo stared. "That was you singing." Mateo felt heat rush to his face. "It's nothing. Just noise." "That wasn't noise," Carlo said. "That was amazing." Mateo shook his head. "You should go home." But Carlo didn't move. "Can you sing again?" Mateo hesitated. Years of hiding pressed against his chest. "No, please," Carlo said. "Just once." Mateo looked around. No one else was nearby. The wind rustled through the rice stalks. He sighed. Just a little. Mateo took a breath and sang. He chose a simple melody, one his father used to hum. When he reached the low notes, he didn't hold back. The sound rolled out of him, thick and heavy, like dark velvet. Carlo felt goosebumps rise on his arms. "That's crazy," Carlo whispered. "Kuya, you sound like those old foreign singers on YouTube." Mateo didn't know what YouTube really was. Carlo pulled out his cheap smartphone. "Can I record you?" Mateo panicked. No recording." "Why not? I'm just a farmer." "So what?" Mateo didn't have an answer. He just knew that once something left his control, it could never be put back. Carlo respected his wish and didn't record. But the secret was already alive. Over the next few weeks, Carlo told a few friends. They didn't believe him, so Carlo brought them to the edge of the field. Mateo tried to refuse, but something inside him was slowly changing. For the first time in his life, people wanted to hear him. Not because they needed something. Not because of obligation. Because they were curious. Because they were amazed. So he sang. A small group gathered. Then a slightly bigger one. Whispers spread. "Have you heard the farmer who sings like thunder? They say his voice is deeper than the ocean." Mateo hated the attention, but he loved what happened when he sang. People stopped talking. People stopped scrolling. People stopped worrying. They just listened. One evening, after Mateo sang near the field, an older woman named Rosa approached him. Rosa was known in the village as someone who once dreamed of being a singer herself before life pulled her in another direction. "You have a gift," she said. Mateo looked down. "I just sing." "No," Rosa said firmly. "You don't just sing. You move people." Mateo shook his head. "Gifts don't feed families." Rosa sighed. "Sometimes they do, but only if you let them breathe." Mateo didn't respond. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay on his thin mattress, staring at the bamboo ceiling. His father's old humming echoed in his memory. "You did something special." Mateo had spent decades pretending that sentence didn't matter. But what if it did? A month later, something unexpected happened. A young woman named Anna arrived in San Isidro to visit her grandmother. Anna lived in Manila and worked as a freelance videographer, filming small documentaries about everyday people. One afternoon, while walking through the village, Anna noticed a small crowd near the rice fields. Curious, she followed the sound and froze. Mateo was singing, not quietly, not timidly. He was singing a slow ballad, his voice sinking so low it felt like the earth itself was singing through him. Anna raised her camera without thinking. She recorded. Mateo noticed only when he finished. "Please don't post that," he said immediately. Anna lowered her camera. "I'm sorry. I should have asked." Mateo looked at the small crowd. "I don't want to be on the internet." Anna hesitated. "May I ask why?" Mateo struggled for words. "Because I'm not that person." Anna studied his face. "You don't have to be a celebrity," she said. "But people deserve to hear voices like yours." Mateo shook his head. Anna didn't push further. She left San Isidro the next day. But the video stayed on her phone. For weeks, Anna couldn't stop thinking about Mateo. About the sadness in his eyes. About the power in his voice. Finally, she made a decision. She uploaded a short clip. No name, no location, just a caption. "Found this farmer in the Philippines. Listen to his voice." She didn't expect much, but the internet did what it always does when it finds something real. The video began to spread. Slowly at first, then faster. Comments poured in. "Is that even real? That voice is insane. He sounds like a mix of Barry White and Elvis. Who is this man?" Millions of views followed. Reaction videos appeared. Music producers shared it. Radio hosts talked about it. People begged for more. Anna panicked. Mateo had explicitly asked her not to post. But it was too late. One morning, Carlo came running to Mateo's house, waving his phone. Kuya, you're on Facebook. You're on YouTube. You're everywhere. Mateo thought Carlo was joking. Then Carlo showed him. Mateo stared at the screen. He saw himself, older, worn, singing. He felt like he was looking at a stranger. His stomach twisted. I told her not to, Mateo whispered. Fear swallowed him. He didn't go to the fields that day. Or the next. He stayed inside his house, curtains closed. He imagined people laughing at him, mocking him, turning his life into a joke. But something else happened instead. People from nearby villages began arriving. Not to mock, to listen. Some brought food, some brought small gifts, some simply said, "Thank you." Mateo didn't understand. Why would strangers thank him? One afternoon, a man wearing a simple polo shirt arrived and introduced himself as Joel Ramirez. I work with a talent scouting group, Joel said. We help undiscovered singers. Mateo almost closed the door. I don't want to be famous. Joel nodded. You don't have to be. But would you consider auditioning for a singing competition? Mateo laughed nervously. Me, on TV? Yes. I don't even own proper shoes. Joel smiled gently. We can help with that. Mateo's heart pounded. The idea felt ridiculous, impossible, terrifying. That night, Mateo visited his parents' graves behind the church. He knelt in the dirt. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, he whispered. The wind moved through the trees. For the first time in years, Mateo sang there. Not for anyone else, not for cameras, for himself, for his parents, for the boy who once sat between two tired adults listening to humming. When he finished, tears slid down his face. He didn't feel small. He didn't feel invisible. He felt alive. The next morning, Mateo told Joel yes. The journey to Manila felt like stepping into another universe. Buildings taller than anything Mateo had ever seen. Cars everywhere. Noise. Lights. People who walked fast and looked busy. Mateo wanted to run. At the audition hall, hundreds of hopeful singers waited. Most were young. Most were stylish. Many practiced flashy runs and high notes. Mateo sat quietly in the corner, wearing borrowed clothes and worn sandals. Some people glanced at him and quickly looked away. He didn't blame them. When Mateo's number was called, his legs felt like wood. He walked onto the stage. 3 judges sat behind a table. Cameras stared at him. What's your name? One judge asked. Mateo de la Cruz. Occupation. I'm a farmer. One judge raised an eyebrow. What will you sing? Mateo swallowed. A song my father used to hum. The judges nodded. Mateo took a breath. For a moment, the lights, cameras, and crowd disappeared. He imagined rice fields, morning mist, his father's voice. He began. Soft, low, controlled. Within seconds, one judge leaned forward. Another's eyes widened. As Mateo reached deeper into his register, the room changed. Whispers stopped. People froze. The sound was so low it felt impossible, yet perfectly clear. Not gimmicky, not forced, honest. When Mateo finished, there was silence. Long, heavy. Then one judge stood up. I've been in this industry for 30 years, the judge said. I've heard thousands of voices. I've never heard one like yours. Another judge added, you don't sound like you're copying anyone. You sound like yourself. The third judge smiled. But if Elvis were alive, he'd probably be shaking right now. The room laughed softly. Mateo didn't understand the reference fully. He only knew that something important had just happened. Mateo advanced, round after round. Each time, he sang simple songs. No fancy tricks, no theatrics, just depth, soul, truth. Viewers fell in love with his story. A farmer who had never chased fame. A man who had spent his life feeding others, now feeding their hearts. People wrote messages. I lost my job. Your voice keeps me going. I play your songs for my grandmother. You remind me that miracles still exist. Mateo read every message slowly, carefully. Sometimes he cried. Sometimes he laughed. He sent money home. He fixed his parents' old house. He hired workers to help in the fields. But he never stopped calling himself a farmer. "I come from the soil," he told reporters. "I don't want to forget that." In the semifinals, Mateo sang a well-known Elvis song. Not trying to imitate, not trying to compete, he sang it in his own style. Slower, lower, darker. When he reached the final note, the audience erupted. One judge said, "That wasn't a cover. That was a rebirth." Mateo didn't win the competition. He placed second, but it didn't matter. Recording labels contacted him. Concert organizers called. His audition video became one of the most watched clips in the show's history. Mateo released his first album. It featured simple arrangements, acoustic instruments, minimal production. His voice didn't need decoration. The album topped charts in several countries. Mateo still couldn't believe it. Fame changed many things, but not everything. Mateo still woke up early. Still liked quiet mornings. Still returned to San Isidro whenever he could. One day, years later, Mateo stood in the same rice field where Carlo had first heard him. Carlo was now in college. Anna was filming a documentary about Mateo's life. Rosa sat on a small stool, smiling proudly. Mateo looked around. "This is where it started," he said. Anna asked, "Do you ever wish you had started earlier?" Mateo thought for a moment. "No," he said, "because then I wouldn't be who I am now. Every year in these fields is inside my voice." Mateo began to sing. Not for cameras, not for fame, for home. The sound rolled across the fields, deep and steady. The rice stalks swayed, the wind listened, and somewhere, in the quiet space between earth and sky, a humble farmer's voice continued to prove that the most powerful music doesn't always come from big stages. Sometimes, it rises from the soil.